So the glutton for punishment that I am, I've been checking out the League Against Cruel Sports YouTube channel recently. And I'm pleased to say they've got something like 1,800 subscribers and less than 1 million views. So I'm outperforming them currently, which is always pleasing. But they seem to have been investing in some fairly expensive cinematography to get their message across. So let's have a look at what they've been coming up with. So we have a ginger lady and a baby, and they're in their house, and it starts with the call of an eagle. I don't know what that's trying to signify, something from an old Western movie or something, I don't know. And she's got a baby, and she's sort of put it down, and then there's this increasing drum roll. I wonder what it's all about. Now at this point it should become clear why they chose a ginger-haired lady, because she's supposed to represent the sort of redness of the fox, because they're indulging in something that these people constantly indulge in, which is anthropomorphism, where they're comparing the experiences and emotions and distress of an animal to a human being. It's funny how they never do videos like this where they're sort of, you know, where the woman is a rabbit being chased down by a sort of fox intent on having its dinner, which would experience a very similar, you know, demise. But of course what they aren't telling you here is that on a fox hunt, generally speaking, the fox gets away. It isn't actually terribly efficient. The foxes that do get caught are typically lame or sick or old or very young, or there is a problem there. That's why they get caught. A healthy, strong fox shouldn't be caught. And this is why it's quite interestingly symbolic here, because this woman, yeah, I know she's got red hair, and red-haired people do have fairer skin, but my brother, my sister-in-law, and my nephew have all got ginger hair. And none of them are as pale as she is, and none of them are of such small stature that she is. And I can only put that down to her diet, because she's probably a vegan. She almost certainly doesn't get enough meat in her diet. And consequently, ironically, she's run down and killed by the hounds, which she would be, wouldn't she? Come on, love, get some meat in your diet, you'll be able to run a little bit faster, and you won't get caught by the foxhounds, well, these imaginary foxhounds. But also, additionally, if this was going to accurately represent a hunt, why was the baby left alone? I mean, I didn't show it because, you know, in the clip, because I don't want to use too much of their video, because they'll probably flag it if I do. But it shows at the end the baby just sort of lying there in its cot, and it's like, well, where are the terrier men? Why aren't the terrier men, you know, yanking the child out of his bedroom, and I don't know what would be symbolic, you know, nailing the door shut, because that would just stop her going back to ground and so on. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? And it's kind of what you expect from these people. But anyway, let's carry on. That's that video. We've now got something else, so let's take a look.
Adrenaline surges through the body. Heart racing. Blood pumping.
Now, first off, I genuinely have to congratulate Lax here for the quality of their cinematography. They obviously paid a huge amount of money to get somebody to knock this up for them. If you look at all of the different camera angles and the sort of the different changes in soft focus and so on and so forth, it's actually pretty good. It does make me wonder, though, if the people who were giving them money, supposedly to, you know, stop cruelty to animals, would be pleased to know that they're just throwing all this money at stuff like this, because that wouldn't have been cheap. Anyway, I digress. What we seem to have here is what looks like a reasonably healthy guy running through the forest, so it's definitely an improvement on the last video. Let's see what happens next.
Burning pain as the wire rips through skin. Cutting deep. Tightening. crushing the windpipe.
Oh, and he's a goner. Same again. It's getting a bit predictable now, isn't it? More anthropomorphism, more comparing a human being's experience and an emotion and pain and suffering with that of an animal. But unfortunately here, they've also really kind of misrepresented how snaring works. If you actually look at Basque's recommendations on how you set a snare, it's very specific, and snares can't, for instance, be locking. They have to tighten and then have the ability to loosen themselves. Now, this is particularly important here because when you're trying to compare a human being to an animal in this respect, and you're doing it accurately, then surely you would know that a human being would go, oh, I've got this thing around my neck. That really bloody hurt, that did, but I'm not being hung. I'm just laying on the ground. Oh, yeah, I can just loosen it and it just comes off. That's what that guy would have done in that exact situation. But you can see that they've done here to try and tug on the heartstrings on emotion, because that's all you've got left when you don't have any facts to back up what you're saying. Snaring has its place, and it actually reminded me to maybe get into some snaring again. I haven't really sort of done it since I was a boy. And, my dad did it to great effect as when we were children, when we had problems with foxes coming into the garden and taking the hens, because we could work out where in the garden the fox would come in. You'd carefully set the snare correctly, and it doesn't tighten around their neck like that and choke them to death. The fox sticks its head through, gets caught, and it's effectively like putting a choke chain on a dog. The fox will flail around and get really angry for like half an hour or so, and then eventually it will just sit there. And then you come down in the morning and you've got a fox completely unharmed, not in any real distress, just sat there, and then you just walk up to it with the shotgun and you just blow it away. That's how it works. That's what it's for. So there's not much else to say here. I suppose if you're snaring rabbits, it's more likely to be fatal, but it all depends on the type of snare you use. You've got to check them every 24 hours, and if you do it properly, then there's no reason for it to be an issue. But again, here we are with them pleading to people who don't really know anything about the subject and just making them feel emotional and thinking, oh, imagine if that was me. It's just so predictable. They really want to try harder than this because there was so much effort went into this video. It was so well made, but then they just ruined it at the end with the actual content of the message it was conveying, which was frankly just complete bollocks. Anyway, let's see what they've got next. So you can see here that they're obviously having a go at driven shooting this time, and they seem particularly concerned about birds being winged, which of course is going to happen. I mean, nothing's an exact science. I mean, if you're throwing a load of shot at a bird as it flies over you, then yeah, of course some of them will be winged. Well, so what? Ask yourself. I mean, if you had the choice between being a battery hen and put in a cage and fed in the way that they do and pumped full of chemicals in order, to be healthy. And then eventually taken to a abattoir and just being hung upside down and having a throat cut. Or being raised in a pheasant pen, being protected from predators, being fed, and then being exercised, and then being released and having around about a 50% chance of survival. If that was me, I would take the chance of being winged any day of the week. So here they're touching upon how some birds are raised for commercial shoots, large commercial shoots. Bearing in mind that like 90% of pheasant shoots in the UK are small syndicates with a group of friends who raise the birds themselves, who don't use commercial suppliers of birds. However, those that do, as they said in their own propaganda, they are being supplied with one-day-old chicks. These birds are then, as soon as they're put into the hands of the people raising them for the guns, are treated like royalty in comparison to the way any other birds are raised in the UK for the table. They're given food, they're put into a spinney. When they're old enough, they can escape into the countryside. They're exercised, because you have to exercise them, because if you don't, they don't fly. And if they don't fly, you're not going to have a very good day's sport, are you? So it's just, again, it's using... it's using false information, basically, to give people a kind of an emotional response to something that actually is extremely ethical. When you think of the land set aside for these birds, that benefits all kinds of wild animals in the UK. If these people had their way, if the League Against Cruel Sports had their way, there wouldn't be any wild spaces left. Not unless we started having some sort of communist regime that forced landowners against their will to use land which wouldn't be, for ways that aren't sort of economically viable. So, yeah. But this sums up the League Against Cruel Sports. Let's be honest. People give their money to them in good faith, hoping that they will do something to prevent animal cruelty. But what really happens is, they use that money to pay themselves huge bonuses and to employ people to make very, very polished videos on YouTube for what? To encourage people to give them more money. This is how it goes. It's like a circular thing. And it's something that's happening with almost all charities in the UK in recent years, and it's quite sad to see. But make no mistake, these people do not have animals' best interests at heart. Anyway, that's me. I'm out.